A poor boy throws himself in front of a millionaire's luxury car. He said, "I need to tell you something that will save your life. Welcome to the channel. Enjoy the video. Give it a like, subscribe, turn on notifications, comment and share." The sleek black Porsche glided through the bustling streets of Manhattan, its polished surface reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun. Behind the wheel sat Sarah Hawkins, her manicured fingers tapping impatiently on the steering wheel as she navigated through the early evening traffic. At 34, Sarah was the epitome of success. CEO of Hawkins Construction, one of New York's most prestigious firms, and a force to be reckoned with in the cutthroat world of real estate development. As she maneuvered her way towards her uptown penthouse, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of the day's meetings, upcoming projects, and the mountain of emails awaiting her attention. The city lights began to flicker on, casting a warm glow over the concrete jungle she called home. Yet, despite the familiar comfort of her surroundings, an inexplicable unease had settled in the pit of her stomach. Lost in thought, Sarah almost missed the sudden blur of movement in her peripheral vision. A small figure darted into the street, directly into the path of her car. With lightning-fast reflexes, she slammed on the brakes, the Porsche screeching to a halt mere inches from the person who had seemingly appeared out of nowhere. Heart pounding, Sarah threw open her car door and rushed out onto the street. There, standing before her, was a young boy no older than 10. His clothes were worn and tattered, his face smudged with dirt, but his eyes, deep, soulful, and oddly familiar, bore into her with an intensity that made her catch her breath. "What on earth were you thinking?" Sarah exclaimed, her voice a mixture of anger and concern. "Saw you could have been killed." The boy, unfazed by her outburst, took a step closer. "I'm sorry, Mum," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "But I had to get your attention. I have something important to tell you. Something that will save your life." Sarah blinked, taken aback by the child's words. "Save my life? What are you talking about?" Before the boy could respond, a cacophony of car horns erupted behind them. The traffic had come to a standstill, and impatient drivers were making their frustration known. With a quick glance around, Sarah made a split-second decision. "Get in the car," she said firmly, ushering the boy towards the passenger side. "We can't talk here." As they pulled away from the scene, Sarah's mind whirled with questions. Who was this child? What did he mean about saving her life? And why did those eyes seem so hauntingly familiar? "All right," she said once they were moving again. "Start talking. Who are you and what's this all about?" The boy turned to face her, his expression serious beyond his years. "My name is not important," he said. "But what I have to tell you is, your life is in danger, Mrs. Hawkins. There are people close to you who are not what they seem." Sarah's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "That's ridiculous. I don't know what game you're playing, but—" "It's not a game," the boy interrupted. "I know things. Things about your family, your company. Things that even you don't know." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She glanced at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following them. "How could you possibly know anything about my family or my company?" The boy's next words stopped her cold. "I know about the hidden accounts, the falsified records, the deals made in the shadows, and I know about your mother." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Her mother had passed away years ago, or so she had been told. It was a subject that had always been shrouded in mystery, one that her father, Robert Hawkins, refused to discuss. "My mother," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. The boy nodded solemnly. "She's alive, Mrs. Hawkins, and she's been trying to reach you." Sarah's mind reeled. It couldn't be true. It had to be some sort of elaborate hoax, and yet the conviction in the boy's eyes made her doubt everything she thought she knew. "This is insane," she muttered, more to herself than to the child beside her. "I don't know who put you up to this, but—" Her words were cut short by the shrill ring of her cell phone. Sarah glanced at the screen. It was her son's school. With a sinking feeling in her stomach, she answered the call. "Mrs. Hawkins," came the concerned voice of Noah's teacher. "I'm sorry to bother you, but Noah hasn't been picked up yet. We've been trying to reach you for over an hour." Sarah's heart dropped. In the chaos of the day, she had completely forgotten about Noah's early dismissal. "I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I lost track of time. I'll be there right away." As she ended the call, Sarah became acutely aware of the strange boy's gaze upon her. There was something in his expression, pity, perhaps. That unsettled her even more than his cryptic warnings. We'll have to continue this conversation later, Sarah said, her voice regaining its usual authoritative tone. I need to pick up my son. The boy nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Of course, family should always come first. Shouldn't it, Mrs. Hawkins? There was something in the way he said it, a hint of accusation, a touch of sadness, that made Sarah's chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't quite name. As they pulled up to Noah's school, Sarah turned to the mysterious boy. Wait here, she instructed, I'll be right back. But when she returned moments later with a sullen Noah in tow, the passenger seat was empty. The boy had vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving nothing behind but a lingering sense of unease and a folded piece of paper on the seat. With trembling fingers, Sarah unfolded the note. Written in a childish scrawl were 5 words that would change her life forever. The truth lies in shadows. As she stared at the cryptic message, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that her carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down around her. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would unravel decades of secrets, test the limits of her relationships, and force her to confront the true meaning of family, success, and redemption. In the back seat, Noah watched his mother with curious eyes, sensing the shift in her usually composed demeanor. Mom, he ventured cautiously, is everything okay? Sarah met her son's gaze in the rearview mirror, suddenly struck by how little time she had been spending with him lately. Everything's fine, sweetheart, she lied, forcing a smile. Let's go home. As they drove through the bustling city streets, Sarah's mind raced with questions. Who was that mysterious boy? How did he know so much about her family and her company? And most importantly, could it be true that her mother was still alive? One thing was certain. Sarah Hawkins' life was about to take a turn she never could have anticipated, and the journey ahead would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself and those closest to her. The Hawkins penthouse was a monument to modern luxury, all sleek lines and gleaming surfaces. As Sarah and Noah stepped out of the elevator, the automated lights flickered on, illuminating their home. But tonight, the spacious rooms felt cold and empty, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Sarah's mind. Why don't you go get started on your homework? Sweetie, Sarah suggested, her voice strained as she tried to maintain an air of normalcy. I'll be in my office if you need me. Noah nodded silently, his backpack dragging on the floor as he shuffled towards his room. The sound of his door closing echoed through the apartment, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. In her office, Sarah sank into her leather chair, the mysterious note clutched in her hand. The truth lies in shadows, she read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. What could it mean? And how much did that boy really know? With trembling fingers, she reached for her phone and dialed a familiar number. After 3 rings, a gruff voice answered. Sarah, is everything all right? Dad, she began, her voice catching. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Robert Hawkins spoke again, his tone was guarded. What's this about? Sweetheart. Sarah took a deep breath. It's about Mum. Dad, is there any chance, any possibility at all, that she might still be alive? The silence that followed was deafening. When Robert finally spoke, his words were careful, measured. Sarah, we've been through this. Your mother passed away years ago. Why are you bringing this up now? But Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The boy's words, her father's evasive response, it all pointed to a truth she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Dad, please, she pressed. If there's something you're not telling me. Enough! Robert's voice cracked like a whip. I don't know where these ideas are coming from, but I won't have you dredging up the past. Your mother is gone, Sarah. Let her rest in peace. The line went dead, leaving Sarah with more questions than answers. She leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. If her father was hiding something, what else might be a lie? A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Noah stood in the doorway, his eyes wide with concern. Mum, are you okay? I heard you yelling. Sarah's heart clenched. How long had it been since she'd really looked at her son? At 10 years old, Noah was growing up so fast and she was missing it all. Come here, sweetie, she said, opening her arms. Noah hesitated for a moment before crossing the room and climbing into her lap. As she held him close, Sarah realized with a pang of guilt how rarely they shared moments like this anymore. "I'm sorry I forgot to pick you up today," she murmured into his hair. "Things have been complicated at work lately." Noah pulled back slightly, his eyes searching her face. "It's okay, Mom. I understand." But did he really? Sarah wondered. How much had her obsession with work cost her relationship with her son? "Hey," she said, forcing a smile. "What do you say we order some pizza and watch a movie together? Just the two of us." Noah's face lit up and Sarah felt a rush of warmth at the sight. "Really? You're not too busy?" "Nothing's more important than spending time with you," Sarah replied, meaning every word. As they settled on the couch with their pizza, Sarah couldn't help but think about the strange events of the day. The mysterious boy, the cryptic note, her father's evasive answers. It all swirled in her mind like pieces of a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. Halfway through the movie, Noah's head drooped onto her shoulder, his breathing deep and even. Sarah wrapped her arm around him, savoring the moment of peace amidst the storm of uncertainty. Her phone buzzed softly and she reached for it, careful not to disturb Noah. It was a text from an unknown number. "The answers you seek are closer than you think. Look to the foundations of your empire." Sarah's heart raced. Was this from the boy or someone else entirely? She glanced at Noah, peacefully asleep, and made a decision. Whatever secrets were lurking in the shadows of her family's past, she would uncover them, not just for herself, but for her son's future. The next morning, Sarah arrived at Hawkins Construction earlier than usual. The modern glass and steel building towered over the surrounding structures, a testament to the company's success. But as she rode the elevator to the executive floor, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this gleaming facade might be hiding something sinister. Her assistant, Emily, greeted her with a stack of messages and a concerned look. "Mrs. Hawkins, your father called. He seemed upset about something. Said he needed to speak with you urgently." Sarah nodded, her mind already racing. "Thank you, Emily. I'll deal with that later. For now, I need you to pull all the company's financial records for the past 20 years. Every transaction, every deal, no matter how small." Emily's eyes widened. "All of them? But that would take—" "As long as it takes," Sarah interrupted. "This is top priority, and Emily, keep this between us." As her assistant hurried off, Sarah locked herself in her office and began her own investigation. She pored over old contracts, cross-referencing dates and names. Hours passed, and slowly a pattern began to emerge. A series of small discrepancies easily overlooked individually, but when taken together, pointed to something much larger. A knock at her door startled her from her focus. "Come in," she called, hastily covering her notes. The door opened to reveal Daniel Foster, her ex-husband and Noah's father. His presence was unexpected, and Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety in her stomach. "Daniel," she said, rising from her desk, "what are you doing here?" He stepped into the office, his expression a mix of concern and frustration. "I've been trying to reach you all day." "Sarah, Noah called me last night worried about you. What's going on?" Sarah sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's complicated. I'm dealing with some issues at work." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Issues that have you forgetting to pick up our son?" "Sarah, I thought we agreed that Noah needed more stability, more attention from both of us." Guilt washed over her. I know, it was a one-time mistake. It won't happen again." "That's what you said last time," Daniel pressed, "and the time before that." "Sarah, I'm worried about you, about Noah. This obsession with work—" "It's not an obsession," Sarah snapped, her frustration boiling over. "You don't understand. There's something going on here, something bigger than you know." Daniel took a step back, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Okay, Sarah, just remember what's really important, all right? Noah needs his mother." As he turned to leave, Sarah felt a sudden urge to confide in him. Despite their divorce, Daniel had always been a voice of reason, a steady presence in the chaos of her life. "Daniel, wait," she called out. He paused at the door, looking back at her expectantly. Sarah took a deep breath. "What would you say if I told you that everything we thought we knew about my family, about this company, might be a lie?" Daniel's brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" She hesitated, then decided to take the plunge. "I think my mother might still be alive, and I think there might be something illegal going on with the company finances." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Daniel closed the door and walked back to her desk, his face a mask of concern. Sarah, these are serious allegations. Are you sure about this? She shook her head. No, I'm not sure, but I have to find out the truth, for Noah's sake, if nothing else. Daniel nodded slowly. Okay, what can I do to help? His offer of support caught Sarah off guard. For a moment, she remembered why she had fallen in love with him in the first place, his unwavering loyalty, his willingness to stand by her even when the world seemed to be falling apart. Just be there for Noah, she said finally. I may need to focus on this for a while, and I don't want him to feel neglected. Daniel reached out and squeezed her hand gently. I'm here for both of you, Sarah, whatever you need. As he left, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. Whatever secrets she uncovered, whatever truths lay hidden in the shadows of her family's past, she wouldn't have to face them alone. But little did she know, the revelations to come would shake the very foundations of everything she held dear, testing her resolve, her relationships, and her understanding of what it truly means to be family. As the sun dipped below the New York skyline, casting long shadows across the city, Sarah found herself still hunched over her desk, surrounded by a sea of documents. Her eyes burned from hours of scrutinizing financial reports, and her head throbbed with the weight of mounting suspicions. A soft knock at the door broke her concentration. Mrs. Hawkins? Emily's voice was tentative. It's past 9. Is there anything else you need before I head out? Sarah glanced at her watch, startled to realize how late it had gotten. No thank you, Emily. You've been a great help today. Go home and get some rest. As the door closed behind her assistant, Sarah leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples. The more she dug, the more irregularities she found. Subtle discrepancies in the books, projects with inflated budgets, mysterious payments to shell companies. It was as if a veil was slowly being lifted, revealing a side of Hawkins' construction she had never known existed. Her phone buzzed, reminding her of a world beyond spreadsheets and bank statements. It was a text from Maria, their longtime housekeeper. Noah's been asking for you. He's worried. Are you coming home soon? Guilt washed over Sarah. Once again, she had become so absorbed in her work that she'd neglected her son. She quickly gathered her things, shoving a few key documents into her briefcase. The rest of the investigation would have to wait. The ride home was a blur of city lights and racing thoughts. As the elevator ascended to their penthouse, Sarah tried to push aside her worries, determined to be present for Noah. The apartment was quiet when she entered, save for the soft murmur of the television coming from Noah's room. She found him curled up in bed, his eyes fixed on a nature documentary about deep-sea creatures. Hey, sweetheart, Sarah said softly, sitting on the edge of his bed. I'm sorry I'm so late. Noah's eyes, so much like her own, met hers with a mixture of relief and lingering concern. It's okay, Mum. Are you feeling better now? The innocence of his question tugged at Sarah's heart. I'm fine, honey, just busy with work. But I'm here now. She smoothed his hair back from his forehead. How about I make us some hot chocolate, and you can tell me about your day? Noah's face lit up, and for a moment, Sarah saw a glimpse of the carefree child he used to be, before the weight of her absences and the tension of her divorce from Daniel had started to take their toll. In the kitchen, as she stirred the simmering milk, Sarah's mind wandered back to the mysterious boy and his cryptic warning. The more she uncovered about the company's finances, the more she wondered if there was indeed some danger lurking in the shadows of her family's empire. Mom? Noah's voice pulled her back to the present. Can I ask you something? Sarah turned, noting the serious expression on her son's face. Of course, sweetie, what is it? Noah hesitated, fiddling with the hem of his pajama top. Is something bad happening? With you and Dad or with Grandpa's company? Sarah's heart sank. She had hoped to shield Noah from her concerns, but clearly her son was more perceptive than she'd given him credit for. Setting down the mugs of hot chocolate, she sat beside Noah at the kitchen island. What makes you ask that? I heard you arguing with Grandpa on the phone, Noah admitted. And then Dad came by and you both seemed worried. Plus, you've been working even more than usual. Sarah took a deep breath, weighing her words carefully. Noah, sometimes grown-ups have to deal with complicated problems. Right now, there are some things about the family business that I need to figure out, but I promise you everything's going to be okay. Noah nodded slowly, but Sarah could see the doubt lingering in his eyes. Is that why you were talking to that boy in the car yesterday? Sarah froze, her mug halfway to her lips. You saw him? Yeah, when you picked me up from school. Who was he, Mom? He looked kind of familiar. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. How could the boy have looked familiar to Noah? Before she could formulate a response, the shrill ring of her cell phone cut through the tension. Grateful for the interruption, Sarah glanced at the caller ID. It was her father. I have to take this, sweetie. Why don't you head to bed and I'll come tuck you in a few minutes. As Noah padded off to his room, Sarah answered the call. Dad, what's going on? Robert Hawkins' voice was tight with barely contained anger. Sarah, I need you in my office first thing tomorrow morning. No excuses. Dad, wait. But the line had already gone dead. Sarah stared at her phone, a sense of foreboding settling over her. Her father rarely used that tone with her, and when he did, it never boded well. After tucking Noah in and assuring him once more that everything would be all right, Sarah retreated to her home office. Sleep was out of the question now. Instead, she spent the night poring over the documents she'd brought home, searching for anything that might explain her father's ire or shed light on the company's secrets. As dawn broke over the city, Sarah found herself standing in front of Hawkins Tower, steeling herself for the confrontation to come. The early morning light glinted off the building's glass facade, but to Sarah, it suddenly seemed less like a beacon of success and more like a house of cards, ready to topple at the slightest tremor. The elevator ride to the top floor felt interminable. When the doors finally opened, Sarah was surprised to find not just her father waiting for her, but also a man she recognized as Gregory Sloan, the company's longtime legal counsel. Sit down, Sarah, Robert growled, gesturing to a chair in front of his massive oak desk. As she complied, Sarah's mind raced. The presence of the lawyer could only mean one thing. Her investigations hadn't gone unnoticed. Would you care to explain, Robert began, his voice dangerously low, why you've been digging through confidential company records without authorization? Sarah met her father's gaze steadily. I think the better question, Dad, is why those records need to be kept confidential in the first place. Robert's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Gregory stepped in, his tone conciliatory. Sarah, we understand you may have some concerns, but I can assure you everything Hawkins Construction does is entirely above board. Is it? Sarah challenged, pulling a file from her briefcase. Then perhaps you can explain these discrepancies I've found. Inflated project costs, payments to shell companies, funds being funneled through offshore accounts. It looks an awful lot like money laundering to me. The color drained from Robert's face, while Gregory's professional demeanor slipped for just a moment, revealing a flash of panic. Where did you get those documents? Robert demanded. That's not important, Sarah replied. What matters is what they reveal. Dad, what's really going on here? And does it have anything to do with Mum's disappearance? At the mention of her mother, Robert slammed his fist on the desk. I told you to leave that alone. Your mother is gone, Sarah. Bringing her into this won't change anything. But Sarah couldn't back down now. She was too close to the truth. Is she really gone, Dad? Or is that just another lie? The tension in the room was palpable. Gregory cleared his throat, clearly trying to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we should all take a step back and... He was interrupted by a commotion outside the office. Raised voices, the sound of running feet. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a team of men in dark suits flooded the room. FBI! Everyone stay where you are! Sarah watched in shock as her father and Gregory were handcuffed and read their rights. One of the agents approached her, his expression grim. Sarah Hawkins, I'm Agent Callahan. We're going to need you to come with us for questioning. As she was led out of the office past stunned employees and flashing cameras, Sarah's mind whirled. How had the FBI known? Who had tipped them off? And then, as they reached the lobby, she saw him, the mysterious boy from the car, standing off to the side, watching the proceedings with a sad smile. Their eyes met for a brief moment before he turned and disappeared into the crowd. In that instant, Sarah knew that her life would never be the same again. The truth she had sought was finally emerging from the shadows, but at what cost? As the FBI car pulled away from Hawkins Tower, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if she had just witnessed the destruction of everything she had ever known. or if this was merely the beginning of a journey towards a truth far more shocking than she could have ever imagined. The interrogation room at the FBI field office was cold and stark, a far cry from the luxurious surroundings Sarah was accustomed to. She sat alone at a metal table, her mind racing as she tried to make sense of the whirlwind of events that had brought her here. The door opened, and Agent Callahan entered, accompanied by a woman in a sharp suit who introduced herself as Agent Rodriguez. They sat across from Sarah, their faces impassive. "Mrs. Hawkins," Callahan began, "we appreciate your cooperation in this matter. We have some questions about Hawkins Construction and your involvement in the company's financial dealings." Sarah leaned forward, her voice steady despite her inner turmoil. "Before we start, I need to know, Wayne, what exactly are the charges against my father and the company?" Rodriguez opened a file in front of her. "We're investigating a complex money laundering operation involving several of Hawkins Construction's international projects. The evidence suggests this has been going on for years, possibly decades." Sarah's heart sank. She had suspected irregularities, but the scale of what the agents were describing was beyond anything she had imagined. "I swear, I had no knowledge of any illegal activities," Sarah insisted. "I only recently began to suspect something might be amiss." Callahan nodded, his expression softening slightly. "We believe you, Mrs. Hawkins. In fact, we have reason to think you might be able to help us unravel this whole operation." For the next several hours, Sarah answered question after question, detailing her recent discoveries and suspicions. As she spoke, a clearer picture began to emerge, one of a vast, intricate web of financial deceit that stretched back further than she had ever imagined. As the interrogation wound down, Rodriguez leaned in, her voice low. "There's one more thing, Mrs. Hawkins. It's about your mother." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. "What about her?" "We have evidence suggesting that Olivia Hawkins didn't die as you were led to believe. In fact, we think her disappearance might be connected to the beginning of this whole scheme." The room seemed to spin around Sarah. Her mother, alive. It confirmed her deepest suspicions, but opened up a chasm of new questions. "Where is she?" Sarah managed to ask. Callahan shook his head. "We don't know. But we're hoping you might be able to help us find her. She could be the key to unraveling this whole case." As Sarah left the FBI office hours later, her head was swimming with information and possibilities. She had been cleared of any wrongdoing, but the future of Hawkins Construction and her family hung in the balance. The sun was setting as she made her way home, casting long shadows across the city streets. Sarah barely noticed the familiar sights of her neighborhood, her mind too preoccupied with the day's revelations. As she approached her building, a figure stepped out of the shadows, causing her to start. It was Daniel, his face etched with concern. "Sarah," he said, reaching out to steady her, "I've been trying to reach you all day. Are you all right? It's all over the news about your father and the company." The simple act of kindness, Daniel's steady presence, his genuine concern, was enough to break the dam of emotions Sarah had been holding back. To her own surprise, she found herself collapsing into his arms, tears streaming down her face. "It's all falling apart, Daniel," she sobbed. "Everything I thought I knew. It's all been a lie." Daniel held her close, his voice soothing. "It's going to be okay, Sarah. We'll figure this out together." As her tears subsided, Sarah pulled back, suddenly remembering. "Noah, where is he? Does he know what's happening?" "He's safe," Daniel assured her. "He's at my place with my sister. I thought it would be best to keep him away from the media frenzy for now." Relief washed over Sarah. In the chaos of the day, she had barely had time to think about how this would affect her son. "Thank you," she whispered, "for looking out for him, for being here." Daniel smiled softly. "Always." As they made their way up to Sarah's penthouse, she filled Daniel in on the details of her interrogation and the shocking revelation about her mother. His eyes widened as she spoke, but he listened without interruption. Once inside, Sarah kicked off her shoes and sank onto the couch, feeling the weight of the day settling on her shoulders. Daniel moved to the kitchen, returning moments later with 2 steaming mugs of tea. "So," he said, settling beside her, "what's our next move?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Our next move?" Daniel nodded firmly. "You didn't think I was going to let you face this alone, did you? Whatever happens, we're in this together, for Noah's sake and for yours." A wave of gratitude washed over Sarah. Despite their past differences, Daniel's unwavering support meant more to her than she could express. "I need to find my mother," Sarah said after a moment. If she's really alive, if she knows something about what's been going on all these years, I have to know the truth. Daniel considered this. Do you have any idea where to start looking? Sarah was about to shake her head when a memory tugged at her consciousness. Wait, she said, sitting up straighter. There might be something. She hurried to her home office, Daniel following close behind. Rifling through a drawer, she pulled out an old photo album, one she hadn't looked at in years. When I was a kid, Sarah explained as she flipped through the pages, Mom used to talk about this place she grew up, a small town on the coast of California. She always said she'd take me there someday, but we never went. Her finger landed on a faded photograph. It showed a much younger Olivia Hawkins standing in front of a quaint lighthouse, her hair whipping in the sea breeze, a carefree smile on her face. Moonstone Bay, Sarah read from the caption. That's it. That's where we need to go. Daniel studied the photo over her shoulder. It's not much to go on, he said cautiously. It's all we have, Sarah replied, a new determination filling her voice. And it's where I'm going to start. As they began to plan their trip to California, Sarah felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She was stepping into the unknown, leaving behind the wreckage of her old life, in search of answers that might change everything. But as she looked at Daniel, saw the unwavering support in his eyes, she knew she wouldn't be facing this journey alone. Whatever truths awaited her in Moonstone Bay, whatever secrets from the past were about to be unearthed, she would face them head-on. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions swirling within Sarah. As she packed a small suitcase, her phone buzzed incessantly with messages and missed calls, colleagues, business partners and reporters all clamoring for answers she didn't have. Daniel arrived early, Noah in tow. The boy rushed into Sarah's arms, clinging to her tightly. Mom, is it true what they're saying on TV? Noah asked, his voice muffled against her shoulder. About Grandpa and the company. Sarah knelt down, meeting her son's worried gaze. Honey, there's a lot going on right now that I don't fully understand, but I promise you, I'm going to figure it all out. That's why your dad and I need to go away for a little while. Noah's eyes widened. You're leaving? Both of you? Can I come? Sarah exchanged a glance with Daniel. They had discussed this at length the night before, weighing the pros and cons of bringing Noah along on what could be a wild goose chase, or worse, a dangerous confrontation with the past. Not this time, champ, Daniel said gently. But you'll be staying with Aunt Lisa and we'll call you every day. It'll be like an adventure, for all of us. As they said their goodbyes, Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She was running off in search of a mother who had abandoned her, while potentially neglecting her own child in the process. But deep down, she knew that uncovering the truth was the only way to secure a future for Noah, one free from the shadows of lies and deceit. The ride to the airport was tense, the car radio buzzing with news reports about the Hawkins construction scandal. Sarah's phone pinged with a message from Agent Callahan. Be careful, not everyone wants the truth to come out. As they boarded the plane bound for California, Sarah felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. She was leaving behind everything she knew, every certainty she had built her life upon. But as the plane lifted off, carrying her towards Moonstone Bay and the secrets it held, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was also flying towards her destiny, towards a truth that had been waiting for her all along. Moonstone Bay was a picturesque coastal town that seemed frozen in time. As Sarah and Daniel drove their rental car down the main street, the quaint shops and friendly faces were a stark contrast to the bustling streets of Manhattan they had left behind. It's beautiful, Daniel remarked, taking in the view of the sparkling ocean. I can see why your mother loved it here. Sarah nodded, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any clue, any hint of her mother's presence. The lighthouse from the old photograph loomed in the distance, a silent sentinel overlooking the bay. They checked into a small bed and breakfast, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. As they signed the guest book, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Excuse me, she said to the elderly woman behind the counter. I'm looking for someone who might have lived here years ago, Olivia Hawkins. Do you know her? The woman's eyes widened for a moment before her face settled into a carefully neutral expression. Can't say that I do, dear. Hawkins isn't a name we hear much around these parts. But there was something in her tone, a flicker of recognition that she couldn't quite hide, that told Sarah they were on the right track. Over the next few days, Sarah and Daniel combed the town for clues. They visited the local library, pored over old newspapers, and struck up conversations with long-time residents. Everywhere they went, they were met with the same response: polite smiles and vague denials. "It's like the whole town is in on some secret," Sarah said frustratedly as they walked along the beach one evening. "They know something. I'm sure of it." Daniel squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We'll figure it out. We've come too far to give up now." As they approached the lighthouse, Sarah noticed a figure standing at its base, staring out at the sea. There was something hauntingly familiar about the woman's profile, the way she held herself against the wind. Sarah's heart began to race. "Mom," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. The woman turned and Sarah gasped. It was as if she was looking at an older version of herself. The same eyes, the same determined set of the jaw. Olivia Hawkins stood before her, flesh and blood, no longer just a memory or a mystery. "Sarah," Olivia breathed, her eyes filling with tears. "My darling girl, you found me." For a moment, Sarah was frozen, a whirlwind of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Then, almost against her will, she found herself moving forward, closing the distance between them. Why? It was the only word Sarah could manage. Years of questions and hurt compressed into a single syllable. Olivia's face crumpled with pain and regret. "Oh, Sarah, I never wanted to leave you, but I had no choice. Your father, the things he was involved in, I couldn't be a part of it anymore." As the sun set over Moonstone Bay, Olivia told her story. She spoke of discovering Robert's illegal activities, of threats and cover-ups that went far beyond simple financial fraud. She had fled to protect herself, and she believed to protect Sarah. "I wanted to take you with me," Olivia said, her voice breaking. "But Robert threatened to use his connections to find us, to take you away forever if I tried. I thought you'd be safer with him, with the life you knew." Sarah listened, her mind reeling. The mother she had mourned, the father she had idolized. Everything was changing, reshaping itself into a new, uncomfortable reality. "But why didn't you ever try to contact me?" Sarah asked. "All these years," Olivia shook her head sadly. "I did try, Sarah, so many times, but your father's influence was far-reaching. My letters were intercepted, my calls blocked. I watched you grow up from afar, always hoping that one day when you were old enough, you'd start asking questions." As night fell, they made their way back to the bed and breakfast. Daniel, who had hung back to give them privacy, wrapped a supportive arm around Sarah's shoulders. In their room, as Sarah processed everything she had learned, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number, but she instantly knew who it was from. "The truth has finally come to light. You've done well, Sarah. Your mother's testimony will be crucial in bringing down the entire operation. Stay safe. We'll be in touch. Your guardian angel." Sarah showed the message to Daniel, a wry smile on her face. "I guess we know who our mysterious helper was all along." "But how did he know?" Daniel shook his head in amazement. "Some questions might never be answered. The important thing is, you found the truth you were looking for." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah, Olivia, and Daniel returned to New York, where they worked closely with the FBI to unravel the full extent of Robert Hawkins' criminal empire. The revelation sent shockwaves through the business world and beyond. Robert Hawkins and his associates were arrested and charged with a litany of crimes. Hawkins Construction, once a beacon of success, crumbled under the weight of scandal and legal troubles. Through it all, Sarah found strength she never knew she possessed. With Daniel by her side and Olivia back in her life, she navigated the storm of media attention, legal proceedings, and personal reckonings. Noah, initially confused and upset by the upheaval, gradually came to understand the importance of what his mother had done. "You're like a superhero, Mom," he said one night as she tucked him in. "You uncovered the bad guys and saved the day." Sarah smiled, her heart full. "Sometimes, sweetie, being a hero just means doing the right thing, even when it's hard." As the dust began to settle, Sarah faced the daunting task of rebuilding her life and career. The family fortune was gone, tied up in legal proceedings and restitution. But strangely, Sarah felt lighter than she had in years. One sunny afternoon, as she sat in the small apartment they now called home, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. It was Gregory Sloan, the former legal counsel for Hawkins Construction. "Mrs. Hawkins," he said, looking older and more haggard than she remembered. "I came to apologize and to give you this." He handed her a thick envelope. Inside, Sarah found documents detailing a series of offshore accounts and hidden assets, funds that had escaped the government's notice. "It's not much compared to what you lost," Gregory said quietly, "but it's clean money. Investments your grandfather made years ago. I've kept it secret all this time, but, well, I think you've earned it." Sarah stared at the documents, a mix of emotions washing over her. This money could change everything, give her family a fresh start. But was it right to accept it? In the end, Sarah made a decision that would have been unthinkable to her old self. She donated the bulk of the money to charities supporting victims of financial crimes, keeping only enough to ensure Noah's education and a modest new start for her family. Months passed, and slowly, a new normal began to take shape. Sarah started a small consulting firm, helping companies ensure ethical financial practices. Daniel, who had proven himself a steadfast partner through the entire ordeal, was by her side both personally and professionally. Olivia, free from the shadows of the past, became a loving presence in Noah's life, making up for lost time with her daughter and grandson. One evening, as they all sat around the dinner table in their cozy apartment, laughing and sharing stories, Sarah looked around at the faces of her loved ones. She thought about the journey that had brought them here, the lies uncovered, the truths revealed, the bonds strengthened and forged anew. In that moment, Sarah realized that while she had lost a fortune and a name, she had gained something far more valuable. She had found her true self, surrounded by genuine love and built on a foundation of honesty. As Noah regaled them with tales from school and Olivia shared another funny story from her years in Moonstone Bay, Sarah caught Daniel's eye across the table. He smiled at her, a smile full of understanding and shared experience. Sarah smiled back, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over her. The shadows of the past had finally been banished, replaced by the warm light of truth and family. Whatever challenges the future might hold, she knew they would face them together, stronger for the trials they had overcome. As the evening wore on and the city lights twinkled outside their window, Sarah Hawkins, no longer defined by her family name or her bank account, felt truly rich for the first time in her life. She had discovered that the greatest wealth of all was not found in gleaming towers or offshore accounts, but in the love of family, the strength of integrity and the power of truth. And as she tucked Noah into bed that night, whispering, "I love you," and meaning it more deeply than ever before, Sarah knew that she had finally found her happy ending, or rather, her new beginning.